going to be, this meeting is being recorded and is being seen on Zoom. Okay, I think it's going to be a fairly short meeting, but appreciate the attendance by everybody on the call. Scott had an obligation that keeps him from joining us. Dano is on the West Coast on business, so it is the three of us. So present are Jeff Calder,
Finsburg,
Dave Harnish,
and also joining us is Town Administrator Steve Poulos. So first up, it looks like we have nobody in the wait room, so no public comment. And I'm just curious, Steve, how does that work in other meetings? Since, as we saw during one of the select board meetings, we were Zoom bombed. How do we prevent people with malintent in joining a meeting if they're being in the waiting room and then entered, if it's hard to identify people?
Yeah, so the way we've been handling it with the larger group meetings is we went to a panel. Zoom has like a panel set up, so the folks on the panel are the only ones that can speak and the only ones that can share their video, their camera.
Okay.
So the people in the waiting room can't speak and can't, display a screen. So they, then if there's public comment, you have to, click on the person specifically and allow them to speak, and you maintain full control over the participants.
I see.
It's not perfect. They can still, if you allow them to speak, I guess they can still get in there. But open meeting law prevents us from requiring introductions. So, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay. It doesn't seem to be a challenge we have here. We kind of fly under the radar a little bit in terms of.
Yeah, I think that one that happened at Iron Rail was so heavily publicized.
Sure.
Well, for one, was heavily publicized, and we had it posted on the website and on the calendar in so many places that I don't know if they use some sort of a crawler or something to look for a meeting that has potential to be an active meeting and target them. But I'm not really sure. But we think that's why we were hit in that specific meeting.
Yeah. Hard to speculate on what would motivate somebody to do that. So
yeah, right.
For sure. Why don't we jump in then? Steve's got a hard stop, and as I mentioned, not a lot on the agenda, but yeah, I do want to keep the meeting cadence that we have of roughly every 2 weeks until we get a little deeper into the budget season, and it'll actually increase. So first up on the agenda is a very preliminary review or view of the level funded FY25 budget, with the caveats of it is going to change. There are assumptions in here about revenue. There are assumptions in here about expenses. And I think there still is the process and the opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, for departments to request something of need beyond level set, and then those will be accommodated as funding and town approves, essentially, at annual town meeting.
Yep, that is accurate.
So just a quick view then, Dave. I don't know if you are driving, have access to this material. I was not going to do a screen share because you are on the phone, so that didn't seem like it'd be fair. Anyway,
I am driving, but I can listen pretty well.
Okay, good. Then Yeah, just really high level, and or maybe it's better for me since Steve, you're the architect of pulling all this together. For me to just ask you to make a brief introduction of what we're looking at here and what maybe is up next in terms of that wish list that you've asked department heads to come up with, and also where the refresh of the capital budget stands. So budget, wish list, and capital maybe would be a good start point for us.
Yeah, sure. So what you're looking at here, or what was distributed, was is basically it's a first look at a draft budget. What it represents is we've sat down with all the department heads and gone through their budget, and reflective on what you see is the only increases are contractual obligations and training costs for staff that require training to maintain certifications and licenses that the town utilizes. Everything else was held flat, so whatever they got last year, they got this year on and as far as assumptions on the expenditures side, you're looking at 10% assumption for healthcare. So that's what we use Maya for our healthcare, and they're telling us 10, 10, 10 over the next 3 years. So that is what right now what we're assuming. Hopefully that's worst case scenario, which is usually what they do around this time. So we're erring on the side of caution and going with the 10 for now.
May I jump in just for a second? I've heard that name before. Is that an acronym? What is Maya?
You had to ask. I don't. I think it's like a Massachusetts specific conglomerate of like insurance companies. It's so
I didn't mean to put you on the
they
spot.
pool.
I
Yeah,
just
no, but basically
just
the
curious.
idea of it is they pool a number of communities together, and ideally it kind of spreads the risk out, and we get more advantageous pricing in both liability insurance and health insurance. I mean, the health insurance, Maya doesn't provide it, but they are kind of like the intermediary between Blue Cross and like Harvard Pilgrim. So yeah, that in a nutshell, that's what it is. But I'm not super familiar with its structure to go in much more detail than that.
But that is an acronym. Is it
Yes, it is. Yeah, MIIA.
MIIA?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So they're advising budget 10% increases over the next few years.
Yeah, and we're assuming 8% on our liability insurance, which is still elevated from I don't know if you're aware with the prior select board and the some issues they had with that with the lawsuit, and so we're still within our 3-year rolling average, which dictates your premium increase. So we're on the high end of the riskier side of things. So our premium increase is going to go up higher than than the people kind of towards the middle of the pool.
I'll put a pin in that, Steve, and maybe send you an email to get a little more download on what that was.
Okay.
That event.
Yep. And we are assuming 3%, I believe, in the last meeting for education. So Superintendent Tracy said that the schools are targeting 3% or below this year. So that's where we came up with that. We're hoping that they get below that 3%, but we're running with 3% for now. The pension assessment is 10.3%. That is essentially, it's an estimate, but it's going to be pretty close to what it is, within probably a tenth or 2%. It's the payment schedule for our outstanding pension liability. Everybody in Massachusetts has a pension liability, all the communities, and they passed a law a number of years ago, 20 years ago, where it requires the communities to be fully funded by 2039. So I believe the Essex County, who is the retirement board that we participate on, is set. Their current funding schedule is set to be fully funded by 2035. And that is, I believe that's all for the assumptions. We baked in some extra money, about 20%, I believe, in the clerk's salary, because last year at town meeting, the town meeting voted to move the elected clerk to an appointed clerk. So this year, by way of special legislation, so the special legislation is moving its way through the Senate and the House. And once that is done, well, if it gets done, it's a high likelihood it will, it then goes to our local election in April. And then if it passes that, we go from elected clerk to a appointed clerk. But on town meeting floor, it was amended to have an overlap of clerks, kind of a transition plan of 5 months. So we have to carry potentially 2 salaries for a number of months. It won't be the full 5 months, because we'll be starting the process on day one. Day one of the 5-month period kind of sets the process when we start to hire, do an open and competitive search, and identify the best candidate for the job.
If the best candidate is the current elected town clerk, then presumably that money is not spent.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no overlap. It's just the same person.
Yep. Yep, that is accurate. Completely.
Steve, it's Dave. Quick question.
Yep.
On the 3% assumption for the school, is that sort of in line with historical average over the last several years? No. Okay.
No. So, well, I mean, it's kind of in an anomaly. The last, COVID to 2020-ish. When COVID hit, the schools have had a number of budgeted positions that were unfilled. So essentially, they were budgeting for a number of positions that they were unable to hire for. And as a result of that, at the end of the year, you get, they call E&D funds. It's basically just excess money that you budgeted that you still have that needs to be appropriated. And it goes into account that on the school side, it's called excess and deficiency. On the town side, it's called free cash. And they have been using that over the last 2 or 3 years to pay down essentially the assessment that would be distributed to the 2 communities. So they contribute, say, $1 million each year. So that's why the last 2 years we've had abnormally low increases. We were almost 0% last year. It was like 3-10% or something like that. But before that, if you average, they probably averaged like 5.5% for a number of years. However, they're thinking that this is the last year with the E&D, and this is it won't. They did cut some positions in the prior year, and they cut pretty much all the positions last year leading into this budget cycle. So this will be the last year that they're going to have some money to offset the assessment, and then next year, meaning not 25 but 26, will be the first year that we're kind of will resume our post-COVID trends.
Got it.
And that will be, that's going to be a difficult struggle. So they make up about 60% of our budget, I think. And, if they go up even 0.5% more than our revenue growth, it equates to more than 1% on, reduction needed in everything else overall. So.
Yeah, because you won't have the benefit of that subsidy. I got it. Yep. Understood.
And I would add,
Thanks.
just for last year, the relative size of the student population from Wenham compared with Hamilton, declined at a quicker pace. So our percent of the student body declined as a percentage of Hamilton. So we benefited from that as well, because it was a lesser amount of the school budget that was borne by Wenham, and that presumably could flip or change or continue. So that is a calculation that's done every year.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that can shift, pretty wildly. It's only
When
a
is that
3-year rolling
figure? Yeah. When is that figure determined?
average. I if I remember right, last year I believe they had that around January.
They should have a pretty good handle on where the students in the school system are coming from.
Right.
Okay. I did note, thank you for that, Steve. I did note that there are some expenses that are also being budgeted, not maybe not significant dollar amounts, but some, uh, which obviously are not contractual if they're expenses. So it looks like there is some increase.
Well, the expenses, so the expense increase, and there are some in there that you're correct. They're not. For one, I'll point out the cemetery, and that is because there was a shift in duties about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where it was an administrative assistant was given the duties of the burial agent, and it's a union employee, and it was never bargained for change of working conditions. So there's a potential that we may want to anyways compensate her for the additional duties that she was essentially forced to take on, and kind of kept her mouth shut. But now the union has gotten wind of it, and we're going to have to bargain those change in working conditions.
Steve, I just want to make sure I'm parsing this this budget right now. Like I'm trying to start at the 30,000 foot level and then back into the minutia, right? And so the first place I'm looking for is on the very last page, which looks like to be the grand total of the cost to run the town, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like about an $850,000 increase in expenses, right? Which looks to be about a 3.7% increase year over year, right? Which doesn't sound too crazy, but I'm then kind of thinking about the 2.5% kind of limit, right? And
Yep.
so then I go to the very first page, and I'm looking at the property taxes, right? And so it would make sense to me that with a small amount of home growth, right, in the town, there would be a small increase in I guess I'm not sure if levy limit is the right place, but basically just property taxes collected, right? And then I'm seeing the 2.5% increase. So it's basically saying, assuming that we just get go push for a 2.5% limit, right? We kind of ask all the citizens to go all the way up to that 2.5 limit, right? It'd be another $500,000, right, of revenue on top of the new houses that would be coming in, right, year over year. And then I see a row that says new growth, and I was kind of confused as to whether is that new growth of homes or is that something else?
Yeah, that's new growth of homes. So
Okay.
it's additions, remodels, new homes. So what we do there, just so it's clear, is if you and Jeff did do the math and pointed this out, but if you look at the prior year's levy limit, and in theory, you would just prior year's levy limit would be your starting point for the current year's levy limit calculation, and you'd multiply that by 2.5%. But what's going on in the background for conservative budgetary assumptions, we bring it back to that new growth. Every year we budget at $150,000 for the year, but the prior year we have to true up the levy limit to what the new growth actually was. So like last year, the new growth was actually $383,000, but we budgeted for $150,000. So now that extra 200 or so gets built into the levy
Mhm.
and compounded at the 2.5%. And we're again budgeting conservatively at 150. So if it comes in at 150, you're not like burning yourself
Mhm.
in the
Okay.
next year. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So that makes sense. And now I understand where that new growth is, right? And different from the levy limit. All right. So when I look at that, I look at very little change in the other revenues, right? We get all the way down to the bottom, which has a $24,000 negative value, which I think means that we have $24,000 of more revenue than we have expenses, if I'm reading that right. Um, and so that means that right now, with this draft budget, we're not going past the 2.5%, right?
Yeah.
Limit.
So it's right. So negative would mean we're spending 24,000 more than we can. But for all practical, I don't have the sheet in front of me. My computer is acting up some on my phone. But basically, I always say if you're within like 50,000 plus
Mhm.
or minus, because
Mhm.
when we go to set the tax rate, you're forced to make a dollar amount that's divisible by a penny. So you can't round pennies. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Okay. You're talking
You're
about the
kind of
mill rate
forced.
thing?
Yeah, right. So you're
Yeah.
forced. The state forces you to set your rate. So even though technically you could raise, X amount of dollars, you can't round that to get that rate. So you have to adjust your other revenue assumptions so that your levy equals a mill rate that rounds to the penny. So it's basically a long way of saying that it's going to you can fluctuate it back and forth, plus or minus $50,000 with the other revenue to get it to the penny. And
Okay.
so you basically it's a balance. In my mind, that's it's effectively balanced,
Mm.
which is what
Okay.
we want to see. That was why we did it so early this year because A, it's my first time through it, and B, we just we really wanted to see can we balance the budget with these assumptions within the restraints of 2.5%. Looks like we can. I mean, just barely, but we can.
Okay. So that was I want to make sure that I had right. This budget basically looks like it stays within the 2.5%.
Yep.
And so there's not a lot of wiggle room, right? For,
Correct.
if 50 grand is your materiality, right? There's only another 25 grand of spending, incremental spending, before we would get past that threshold and into a more problematic area or more,
Yeah.
complicated area to fund the town.
Yeah. So what we're looking at now, next kind of probably a good opportunity to talk about next steps is we're diving a little deeper into our revenue assumptions, not the property tax revenue assumptions, but the other ones, list of primarily excise tax, permits and fees. See if it makes sense to you want to be conservative, obviously, but at some point you become a little too conservative. So it may make sense to bump those up a little. So that would obviously change the picture a little bit when you're looking at the bottom line.
Okay.
We're also hoping that health insurance comes in below 8%. I mean 10%. We're hoping the schools come in below 3%. Again, they could come in above too, and it's a different conversation. But we're also looking at things like Pleasant Pond for potentially changing the model that they use down there so it's fully self-supported. Right now, the tax levy supports about $25,000, I believe, to operate it down there. And in the tickets, the parking permit sales are a very, very small fraction to offset. I think total it costs the town about $35,000, and we probably bring in like $7,000 or $8,000 in revenue through fees for the people that use it. So we're looking at possibly changing that model, which would free up some money. So there's a few things going on that we're trying to identify, and then start to look about and talk about what needs departments have. However, not really very, very many needs were brought forward. Everybody, kind of bunkered down, and is they understand that things are tight, and they're going to make it work with the budget that they had last year. One request that will be before you guys, I'm sure, at some point was is to keep permanent the hour increase with Cape Mallory and planning, just due to the the master plan and MBTA zoning and all the action items that are kind of coming out of that study. That it's going to be a pretty heavy lift for planning to to carry on.
Okay,
Steve,
thanks very much, Steve.
Steve, quick question, and this is more of an overall process question. If for some reason we found something important, like someone brought something forward that we thought was important to fund, but it was a little bit outside the budget, is there ever a possibility, and I know it's sort of sacred cows, to reallocate within budgets? Nobody's going to ever say that their budget, that they're overfunded. But let's say you had to operate this sort of net zero basis outside of the inflation for healthcare and medical. Could you ever, I mean, does it ever happen that there's reallocations between departments and budget subledgers? I know it's hard because the town's been constrained for a long period of time, but just curious to the extent something comes up in the future.
Yeah, I mean, sure, we do. I mean, you can reallocate. I mean, in a hypothetical situation, if you identify a department that's it has doesn't spend a large percentage of their budget every year, that you could in theory reduce that budget and increase another. However, what we do currently, and was more common practice, is we you can hold the departments level funded with the anticipation that some that are running really lean may overspend, and then at the end of the year you have excess funds that will exist in other departments, and you make the transfers at that point.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. Okay,
so
thanks.
They can kind of slow down. One department's like, all right, we're gonna have to take this money and move it over here, and you're gonna slow down or not do X, Y, and Z until the new year, like that. You kind of, because then we watch the expenditures throughout the year.
Sure. Yeah, it's probably more common on the capital than the operating budget, where you can defer things. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Would this be a good time to talk a little bit about how free cash is used or has been used?
Yeah. So, I mean, so just like we were talking about, and I've had this conversation with Jeff, you always want to be careful. I know you guys, we haven't really talked about making budget cuts or how lean departments are, how heavily weighted a certain budget is, but you just want to be careful when you're looking at it, because the town, this is not uncommon for a lot of communities in the Commonwealth, to fund their capital programs with free cash. And because a lot of it, because of what David said, that if you have a bad year, you can defer capital, but it's difficult or impossible to defer reoccurring operating costs. So the town depends on the free cash generation, is essentially your budgeted revenues. So revenues that come in above what you budgeted, and departments that spend less than you budgeted. So those two amounts added together are basically your free cash number. And those two amounts are what the town depends on to fund its capital program.
And you said we're going to know that figure well ahead of when it became available last year. And was that?
Yeah, I'm hoping by the middle of this month, couple of weeks, should know for sure. Yeah,
it's awesome. Last year it was deep into the first quarter.
Yeah, it was March, I think. Yeah, so I just said, when you think it's like, oh well, I just found $200,000, we could, in excess revenue, we could ratchet it up, we could ratchet the revenue up, balance the budget, and the reality of it is you'll see that impact, that direct impact in free cash 18 months later at town meeting. So you effectively have less to appropriate for building maintenance and rolling stock and things like that.
Yeah, and we
A little
obviously,
bit of a balance.
yeah, I always like to try to avoid bonding for capital where we can, of course, because of the expense and it being outside the 2.5%. If it's approved
Yeah,
as an
included.
exclusion to the 2.5% limit. Thank you, Steve. Any other questions from Finn, Dave? It's, as I mentioned, it's an early look. It'll change, and of course we do have the departmental meetings that'll come up in the next month or so, where we'll be able to deeper dive in with the actual department heads, some of whom you've been meeting with, of course, but we'll have that opportunity to go through their budgets in a much more detailed level. This is meant to really just be a kind of a preliminary high level look.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All righty. Yeah, and then I guess segueing then the next agenda item was if either Finn or Dave wished to bring the group up to speed on any of the liaison meetings that they had over the last couple of weeks.
I haven't had any meetings in the last 2 weeks. I got some documents from the two different chiefs and sent them back with some comments, but haven't heard from them. So I'll probably good reminder to touch base with them this week or next.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one more tomorrow with Mike Hurdy over at facilities and DPW. So that'll be my final pass through, at least first pass through all the departments I'm responsible for. I went to a council on aging coffee that they do at 8 a.m. on the at the Legion Hall just to meet some of the folks over there as well. But I think, right now, the departments that I'm responsible for, it feels like they feel like they can, I won't speak for them, but they feel like they're going to do okay, managing to sort of level budgets. And there's things that the DPW was able to pull forward on things like the road contract on 97 that was sort of state supported. So he feels pretty good about where he stands on the roads and the ratings and where we are. So I have one more to have tomorrow, and I'll get through that. I'll first pass through everybody. But in my meeting so far, I haven't heard anyone absolutely groaning at this point that they can't, make the numbers work at this stage. That doesn't mean there won't be an ask. It just they understand the mandate, and they're working hard on their first passes that have been submitted so far.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like they absolutely did get the message.
Maybe I got the easy ones this year. I didn't get the school, so so far so good.
So good.
Yeah.
They
so
do still have through the process that Steve has described before about asking if there is any items that they would put on a wish list. Yeah.
Yes.
If there's some found money, what would people want?
Focus on. Yep. And I got that. I did get that back from Kim Butler in the library. I think they're struggling with the people who manage the stacks, the hourly workers. The turnover there has been tremendously high, and they'd love to be able to, at some point, may not be this year, have another sort of permanent or low salaried option there, so that they could offer some career pathing and just have it be a more permanent position for one of the people or a senior person at that level. So that was sort of one of the asks, but so far so good. I will say to the feedback on having the liaisons, I guess I don't have the history, and you may have it, Steve or Jeff or Finn, but it looks like there were liaisons back in the past that Win Dodge mentioned to me, and then they sort of went dormant for a while, and maybe they didn't know how to sort of utilize them. And now people that they're sort of back, I think people are appreciating having it. So we'll try to add value wherever we can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I think that Finance Committee got away from that due to a fairly significant period.
Turnover problem, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was just hard to maintain given some folks that were on the committee moved out of town, and then yeah,
Yep. Yep. Totally understood.
yeah. So
Yep. That's
that had been the goal, and then maybe just briefly, I'll touch on it for Finn and Dave. But Steve and I met a week or so ago, and I shared some of my thoughts, which I think align really nicely with Steve's goal, being new in the fairly new now, still in the position of town administrator, of where to get the budget to. In terms of adding more descriptive and maybe more narrative to the budget and what can be presented to taxpayers prior to the annual meeting. So moving toward that and just having more information that I think would be beneficial for people within the town to understand what the various departments are doing
yeah.
and help them with the judgment about whether the money is being spent well, by understanding a little better maybe than some do, of just the various functions of the departments here.
So are you thinking Jeff and Steve, they like have a legend in the warrant where you sort of say, okay, here's this department, DPW, and they're responsible for X, Y, and Z? Are you thinking that sort of narrative, more of an assessment, or a sort of terms and glossary? This is what this department does. This is what they're responsible for.
No, I mean, well, first, I think that this is, we were down a finance director. He'll be starting the end of the month. So he's going to play a crucial role in this. However, I don't think we're going to get all the way there this year, but what we're looking to at least start this year is incorporating, at least in the budget presentations, as we work towards, actually a formal budget document, but just some sort of, performance metrics, maybe like Jeff and I were talking, how many seniors does the COA service? How many meals on wheels do they deliver? How many trips to the doctor's office do they provide?
Yep.
DPW, how many miles of road do they pave? How many ADA ramps did they put in? How many aprons did they repair? How many, you know what I mean? Like all the, just
so sort of KPIs. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of see what data, like right now, like the department heads have never reported like that. So we're not even sure exactly, what data is readily available. Let's try to start with that. And then, once Jeff Soulard, the finance director, hopefully, that's going to be top of his list to really start working out, a budget document for, obviously I don't think it'll be there this year, but, certainly it's within the scope of being able to be done following.
That's certainly the goal. I think of it kind of like self-assessment that is done before
it's
an annual review of what did you accomplish. So help us understand, what did your department do last year, and what are your goals? What do you wish to accomplish in the coming year? I think it would better inform folks about where the money goes in town.
Yeah, and it's also sort of how do you as a department head measure success, right? What do you guys use to sort of run your business, and what are the things you look at, right, to sort of declare victory or a good year, or things you, like you said, want to get done? That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, exactly. I know, Steve, you need to out, but I think we're at a point where we can call the meeting, unless Finn or Dave have anything additional you'd like to add or ask.
No, I'm fine. I really do like this KPI thing. It'll be very helpful and will help me to help us to explain to the citizens. What is it that we say is acceptable? What is good service? What is acceptable service? Which isn't, and say we are, benchmarked the right way. So I like it.
So I will I will ask if somebody would like to make a motion to end the meeting.
I will do that. This is Finn. I'll make the
Do we have
motion
a
to end the
second?
meeting.
Yep.
Awesome.
Dave Harnish, second.
Second
Yep.
it. Okay, all in favor? Jeff, yes.
Finn, yes.
David,
Excellent.
David, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Steve. Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night. Thank you.